Everyone, hello and welcome back to another shot of Buckshots with Trevor and Luke. Our first playoff episode. The way I guess playoffs are scheduled and how our show is scheduled. I think Trevor, we just kind of discussed what happened in the last game, maybe preview what's yet to come. Before the show, I said it's kind of tough to talk about playoff games that happened already and try to preview what's going to happen next and adjustments and all that stuff. So I think it makes most sense to just kind of brush over what just happened, what we just watched, and what we can kind of preview for Wednesday's game. We are recording right after Game 4. I mean, you're going to get our instant reactions, our off the top what we saw, what maybe what needs to change for next game, what Bucks did well, whatever. But let's just kick it right off. In this game, obviously, no Chris Middleton. He's out for probably another week and a half, maybe 2 weeks with an MCL sprain. But that didn't really seem to be a problem today, right? Bucks beat the Bulls 119-95. Just to throw some stats at you, Giannis 32, 17 and 7 on 11 of 22 shooting. Drew Holiday 26, 2 and 7 on 10 of 21 shooting. And I think maybe both of us probably agree on this that the key factor in this game was Grayson Allen, 27 points, 10 of 12 shooting, 6 of 7 from the three-point line. Brook Lopez, 2 points in 21 minutes. Wes Matthews, 6 points in 26 minutes. And then Bobby Portis, 14 and 10. On the Bulls side, Zach LaVine led the way, 24 points. DeMar DeRozan added another 23. And Pat Williams, another 20. So, Trevor, right off the cusp, was I right in saying that, Grayson Allen was probably the star of this game?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a result of how the Bulls play defense. They still have it in their mind that they can win when they just double team Giannis, and that just it didn't work game three. It's not working game four. It's not going to work five, six, or seven. The reason why games one and two were so close was in part because of the Bucks just not hitting open shots or just not hitting shots, and
Mm-hmm.
now when you get them wide open looks, I know 51% from deep, that's not real sustainable, but you get them open looks, you got to expect them to shoot about 40%. And, when you leave Grayson Allen open the way they did tonight, once he gets into a rhythm, he doesn't need to be open anymore. And it was just too easy for him.
And you mentioned there, 51% from the 3-point line for the Bucks in this game, 17 of 33. Trevor, you said that's maybe not sustainable for upcoming games, upcoming playoff games. Um, I don't necessarily know that you need to shoot 52% from the 3-point line to beat this Bulls team. In my mind, I think the only way that the Bulls beat you is kind of what they did game two. And I know game two with Chris Middleton, he was out, in the middle of the third quarter, kind of the end of the fourth quarter. They had to make adjustments, and he was guarding DeRozan. That's the game DeRozan went for 40. Um, so it does seem that this Bucks team is playing well without Chris Middleton. For what it is, I mean, it's great to see right now. Um, but to me, the only way the Bulls win is if that happens again. DeRozan goes for 40, and you're getting Caruso making 5 threes or Nikola Vucevic, making another 5 threes, whatever. This almost feels like the Bulls coming up on Wednesday. It almost feels like the Bulls have close to 0% chance of winning. Am I overrating this Bucks team, or is that kind of what you're thinking?
I mean, it certainly feels that way. We'll see if Caruso plays. Obviously, he's being, looked at for a possible concussion. I mean, if he doesn't play, I think the Bulls just beat the crap out of or the Bucks beat the crap out of the Bulls because without him and Ball, we've seen this Bulls team. They can't shoot the three super well without Ball. DeRozan certainly can't. And, Levine was red hot the first half, and they still had, 41 points at half.
Hmm.
So it's just not sustainable. And they live and breathe on the mid range and the threes. And with Vucevic playing the way he is, and with the mid range shots not falling against his defense, I mean, especially in Milwaukee, it's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. No Bulls fans are going to be traveling for that. I
Hmm.
mean, it feels done, but I'd be willing to bet if you ask any Bucks player, they'd say exactly the opposite.
Right. And I just wanted to bring up there, you said the Bulls kind of live and die on that mid-range shot, right? everyone applauds DeMar DeRozan. He's still keeping old basketball alive, keeping the mid range going. Is that a good thing? You know, is taking mid range shots, taking 20 mid range shots a game, a good game plan for today's NBA?
Yeah, no, like, and Chris Middleton does it, but he does it in a different way. Like if you look at
Hmm.
Chris Middleton, he can hit you with the fadeaway, with the post moves, with the mid range shots, but he can also hit the three. He can also drive to the rack and dish it out. DeRozan can't hit the three. He was 0 for 5 tonight. He's never been a good 3-point shooter. So when you don't really, force the defense to come up on you a ton at the 3-point line, they can just sag and wait for you to hit mid range. And if you're taking contested mid range jumpers all game, you're not going to beat the Bucks playing that way, and you're definitely not going to win three in a row.
Yeah, I mean, I said it off of, I think, to start game two. Like, I understand that, DeMar DeRozan can hit those mid range shots. I'm not totally mad that he's taking those. I mean, if you want, of course, you don't want to give him open mid range shots, but if they're going to come down the court and DeRozan's going to take a contested mid range shot, whether it goes in or not, I think that's damn near a win almost every time for the Bucks. Um, you,
Absolutely.
yeah,
At the end of the day, it's a two. It's
right.
just as much as a wide open layup. It's not like Curry hits a crazy three and it rips your soul out. It's 2 points.
And the thing with mid range, how much does that get the crowd going? Because the crowd, I think we've talked about it many times. Like the crowd is such big in NBA games. It's such big in NBA playoffs. I mean, you could kind of tell a little bit. The Bulls made a little bit of a run in the third quarter, 11-0. And the crowd kind of got behind them. But that just went to the wayside. Once they get silenced. But mid range doesn't get the crowd going like a transition dunk or an open three or anything like that. So while this Bulls team does have talent in my mind, I don't necessarily know that they have the talent to win in this NBA, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, like that 11-0 run was great for them, but they still lost the quarter.
Yeah.
It's a lot tougher to make runs. Obviously, like I kind of talked about, it's 2 points versus three. If you're hitting some crazy threes, you can rack up points a lot quicker. But that 11-0 run with only really mid range shots, it's going to be harder for the Bulls to come back from deficits. And I would be shocked if they didn't find themselves in a hole of 10 points at some point in game five.
Yeah,
And I just don't see them building their way out of it like they would be able to if DeRozan could hit a couple threes.
for sure. And then let's say Grant, let's just assume the Bucks win Game 5 here. We've been talking all year, kind of, the Bucks have these third quarter. I don't want to call them collapses, but there's lapses where they don't score, they don't play defense well. Does that concern you? Maybe I guess we're looking forward to what a matchup against Boston. Does that concern you against a team like Boston, or maybe even after that against Philadelphia or Miami? These third quarters could definitely tank the Bucks.
A little bit. I'm going to be interested to see how the Bucks defense does against Boston. Obviously, losing Chris Middleton loses you a great defender, but it's tough to tell, right? Because the Bucks defense is the best in the league by about 10 points per game so far in the playoffs. But
Hmm.
they're playing the Bulls. To your point, Boston looks really good, but
Yep.
like we've kind of talked about, Brooklyn is gassed, especially Kevin Durant.
Hmm.
And I mean, Bruce Brown had to drop 26 and they still lost by like 6 points. So Boston isn't exactly playing a huge Brooklyn team. It seemed like Brooklyn's only shot was game one. So, to answer your question, I think a lot will depend on how Boston is when they play, you know, the Bucks, because
Yeah,
Brooklyn is a one man show. If they can weather the storm against Boston, they can weather it against anybody. But Boston, especially if they're without Chris, will be a good test.
yeah, and I don't necessarily know that Boston has experienced someone like the Bucks who kind of bang down low. Obviously the Nets, aren't known for driving and getting and one fouls and shit like that. So that'll definitely be interesting. Moving forward, I just wanted to bring up one thing about Bruce Brown real quick. I've taken the under in his points for all three games in Prize Picks promo code Flurry. He's gotten the over in all of them, and I didn't know that Bruce Brown turned into the best center in the NBA. Um, but just going back to the Bucks here, I wanted to bring up something that maybe is a little bit. I know this is a great game for the Bucks. Something that's a little bit of concern is 12 of 18 from the free throw line. I know it's only six misses, but that's only 67%. And I don't necessarily know if it's what's more concerning is the misses or only getting 18 free throws. I think we've kind of become normalized for it. Almost feels like Giannis should have close to, maybe not 18, but close to 14 to 15 free throws a game. Is that something that happens with Chris Middleton out, not creating or whatever? Maybe, but I do think that's something to look into. Right there, maybe not necessarily getting to the free throw line as much as we've been accustomed to.
Yeah, and to your point about making it's always so tough because, like, you look at it as a team, again, like you said, 66.7% shooting. That's not great, but you look at the free throw shooters, right? Giannis was 9 for 12. That's solid.
Hmm.
Drew is 1 for 2. I mean, that's such a small sample size. That's tough. Allen 1 for 1. Bobby Portis 1 for 3. So obviously that's, not great, but it's a low percentage, but it's a really low sample size also for a lot of guys.
Right.
So individually, I don't know if I'm nervous. I just wonder if, and watching a lot of the fourth quarter, it just seemed like the refs were just letting a lot of stuff go, knowing it's already over. And I wonder if that was part of what went into it because it seemed like it at times.
Which is fair. And one other thing that I wanted to bring up is we've kind of seen this as a trend in this series is the Bucks not taking care of the ball. They finished with 14 turnovers again this game. Bulls had 11. Um, so offense, they are scoring, but against I called Chicago a JV team today, but against a varsity team, say the Celtics or the Heat or something like that, you got to imagine that 14 turnovers is going to be a death sentence in my mind. And I do think that Drew Holiday plays, of course, he's a great player. He's a great defender, great offensive player. At times, does he play a little out of control or try to do a little bit too much? I know the Bucks, need him, but especially early in the games, it looks like he tries to get stuff going too quickly, as opposed to just kind of settling in the offense a little bit.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting to see, assuming the Bucks win, Boston wins. I mean, something crazy would have to happen for that not to happen. But like we talked about, the Bulls were double teaming Giannis. If Robert Williams is back in full, obviously he was back a little bit game 3. I don't know how healthy exactly he is, but they definitely don't have to double.
Yeah.
And so if they don't have to double, you're not getting those open looks. They have better defenders. Turnovers is going to become more of a problem. So that is definitely going to be something to keep an eye on because I don't think Marcus Smart is a very good defender. I think he's solid, but I don't think there's much of an argument that he's better than Levine or DeRozan.
It To me, Marcus Smart is almost, of course he's a good defender. He's almost more of a pest than he is a defender, right? He almost seems to, he's a little comparable to what Caruso has been doing this series. To maybe a little bit of what Patrick Beverly's been doing in their series. Um, I don't necessarily know that Marcus Smart can shut guys down, more that he can get into guys' heads and kind of fuck with them a little bit and get them off their game, which I guess is part of what makes you a good defender, right? But that was just speaking to your point. I do think Robert Williams is someone who's probably not on a lot of people's radar that could be an X factor in the next series. So I do like that you brought him up. One other thing I wanted to mention: Bulls had 8 offensive rebounds, while the Bucks had 5. Is that anything to look into, or is this just kind of an outlier? I know there were stretches where Brook Lopez and Giannis were both out, leaving Bobby Portis to try to clean up boards, which makes sense why they're not getting offensive rebounds. But is this something to look into, or is it just an anomaly?
I don't think so at all. Not only is it not a huge loss, but I mean, I would kind of expect the Bucks to only get 5 when you're shooting 52% from the field and
Right.
51% from deep. It's going to look odd on paper, but I don't think anybody's too freaked out about it. Now, you know, you got to probably find out if there is a problem, maybe work on it a little bit because Boston's gonna you're gonna need to out rebound Boston on the offensive glass. So
Yep.
if there is something, make sure you find it sooner rather than later.
Right. I just had a couple more things. One thing that just go quick. One thing that caught my eye is Jordan Orr played 2 minutes and not get a shot up. That's out of the ordinary. And I don't know if you listened to it right after the game. Malik Andrews was interviewing Giannis. Giannis mentioned that this is easy for the Bucks right now. He said with how well the role players are playing, obviously Giannis is passing very well in this game. He called it easy for him. I don't know what you think, but that's the way it seems right now to me. It kind of feels like that game two is kind of an outlier, an emotional kind of win for Chicago with Chris Middleton going down. But this really does feel like, as a fan watching these guys play, it does feel like this is an easy series for the Bucks.
Yeah, yeah, it does, and I almost wonder how much of an impact Chris Middleton being out has. Psychology of teams, as I'm sure people know, is really weird. Like we saw when Giannis went out against the Hawks, you would have thought it would be a death sentence. Granted, Trae Young was out too, but it was almost like with Drew and Chris, it's like, oh, like now we have to like gear it up, and they went into gear. It feels like the same thing with Middleton here. It almost feels like the bench players kind of get into a lull of feeling, all right, hit your shots, get some rebounds here. And now when it's time for them to step up, it kind of wakes them up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of what we're seeing here, especially in games 3 and 4. And, with Bobby and the crowd in game 5, I mean, that alone is going to be big. But if Grayson Allen starts hitting some shots, this could get out of hand real quick.
Yep. Totally agree with you on that. And Trevor, I'll ask you one more question. What's the game plan to win Game 5? How do the Bucks win Game 5?
I think game 5 is going to be. I think what the Bulls are going to try to do. Well, what they are going to do, they're going to come out desperate,
Yep.
and they're going to be throwing shit at the wall, hoping it can stick. If you're the Bucks, I think all you really have to do is stay within 5 going into the fourth quarter, because the Bulls emotionally, physically are going to be gassed. We know how the Bucks aren't great in the third quarter, so if you can withstand that third quarter, keep it close in the fourth, have the fans behind you. We know their money is mid range. That starts to fade in the fourth quarter. As long as you can stay within striking distance, I think they'll be just fine.
I would imagine too. I know, I guess this kind of goes with all Chicago teams. Maybe it's my Wisconsin bias, but you got to imagine this game's going to get a little chippy. Game 5, they're a young team. Um, you know, they of course they want to win, but they're in a spot where they can't really win. I don't know if that's the correct context to put that. And we kind of saw it at the end of this last game with Zach Levine and Bobby Portis kind of getting into it. I would imagine we see a little bit more of that in Game 5. This almost feels like like you said, stay within 5. I don't necessarily care if this is a close game or not. This is kind of a game where you win and hopefully you get out with any injuries, right?
Yeah, and to your point about that, like Portis Levine scuffle, like looking at the replay, Giannis blocked him cleanly.
Yep.
Bobby got the ball and then like got a little of his face, but I mean, clearly there was nothing to it. Kept his arm on the ball. I mean, we see players hate to give it up, but then I think it was really telling to see Levine lash out and start it.
Hmm.
Like Bobby wasn't going to back down. That's why he went to it. But right after you saw him point to his ring finger, I mean, to your point
Hmm.
about it being easy, he treated it kind of like a joke. Like, all
Yeah.
right, dude, like settle down. And seeing Levine actually get frustrated by that, to your point about the chippiness, it's going to be there. And unfortunately for the Bulls, I don't think the Bucks are going to bite. I don't think they're stupid enough, and I think they know that all they have to do is do their job, and it's going to get off the rails.
Yep. Just get out of the series. Not these two teams aren't necessarily rivals. Maybe it's a budding rivalry. But with how close they are, fan bases are rivals in all the other sports. I agree. This is just a series where just win and get out and start thinking about Boston as soon as you can. I mean, Chicago's kind of they're right one step out of the rear view mirror right now, which feels kind of good to say leading the series 3-1, right?
Yeah.
So Trevor, I know, we kind of mentioned off the top, this is kind of easy for the Bucks. It doesn't really feel like they're going to lose the series. It doesn't really feel like they're going to lose Game 5. Is there a way that the Bucks can lose Game 5 in your mind?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the number one way is going to be the Bulls are going to come out firing.
Hmm.
If they start hitting some tough shots, and the Bucks panic going into half in terms of like, it's a 7 point game. They start to make stupid turnovers late in the second.
Hmm.
I think the Bulls have a real chance from what we've seen, carrying that over to the third quarter. enough of a lead where it's something like 19 points where the Bucks can get it close but can't quite take it away. I
Hmm.
think that's probably the only way the Bulls can win, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, and just to add on top of that, making some crazy shots, the Bulls are going to need one guy to kind of take over. Maybe that goes back to game two with DeMar DeRozan kind of taking over. And like I mentioned before, I think if DeMar DeRozan is giving you 40, then he's having a good game, and I don't know that there's much you can do about it. Because he's the kind of guy who once he gets hot, he's one of those guys who'll take any shot, and it feels like they all go in, kind of on that Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving kind of territory there. But I mean, other than that, I'm very happy with this win. I'm sure you are as well. I'm very happy with the last two wins. I should say I'm very happy with 3 out of the 4 games. If Chris Middleton doesn't get hurt in game two, is this a sweep? Maybe. But I'm not necessarily totally mad with the game two loss. It's hard to adjust when your second leading scorer goes down, and All Star goes down, and DeMar DeRozan's giving you 40. But are you kind of in that mindset, or are you? Are there some obviously the things to clean up? But are you upset about anything that the Bucks have been doing, or anything like that?
No, and this will probably turn into a big positive too, but like looking at Boston, we kind of talked about Boston. Boston is next round if they win,
Most likely.
99% chance. Yeah. At first I think a lot of Bucks fans came into the series and said, "Okay, let's dispatch the Bulls early and hope that the Celtics win a war of a series." Seeing how hot the Celtics are, we kind of see this every year with the Brewers hot in August, kind
Hmm.
of slow down at the playoffs. With the Bucks, red hot going into half, slow in the third quarter. Teams that are hot, let's say the Celtics do get the sweep, and it is possible, they're going to have some time off here.
Yep,
Obviously, game 5 is Wednesday, and I'm not saying Celtics are going to come out cold shooting 20%, but that extra time off doesn't always help. And so I think at this point, if the Bucks can win game 5, even if they lose game 5 and win game 6, with the Celtics sitting at home, that's not as bad as I would have thought it would be going into the playoffs.
for sure. And if you need anything to prove that teams do get rusty, just take a look at the last 5 Packer seasons. And
Yep.
and, and that's your answer right there. Um, Trevor, anything else you want to mention about this game, or anything else about playoffs?
Just, I understand Bulls fans are frustrated. I get it. They had a great start to the season. They're one of the best teams in the NBA. They were the best team in the East for a while. I just don't get booing your own team,
Right.
especially at home in the playoffs. You don't have Ball. Caruso got hurt, and they were doing some booing in Game 3. I just don't understand that. You're going up against the reigning champs, who beat the Suns that right now look unbeatable in 6 games in the playoffs last year. Yeah, they got blown out, but you took a game in Milwaukee.
Hmm.
I just that irks me. That just gets me in a bad mood seeing that Bulls fans are booing their players because as much as some of them have choked, that's just not right. Seeing
Well,
how they've done this year.
yeah, especially like you said, there's talent on this Bulls team. Like they can play basketball. The fans are booing Chicago. Like this is the first time they've been good since Michael Jordan. I guess Derrick Rose, you can throw him in there, but I don't necessarily know that those Derrick Rose teams were as good as this team. Obviously, they don't have Derrick Rose in this team, but um, that says something about the fans that you're booing. In your first, I guess, real playoff experience in 25 years. So I totally agree with you. I did want to bring up one thing you said, Lonzo Ball. I think every single game I've heard announcers say this, that Lonzo Ball makes this a whole new series. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. Um, Lonzo Ball, the guy who averages 12 and 5 assists on the year. I understand he's a good defender, but Lonzo Ball, he's a very hyped prospect coming out of high school, coming out of college. He's had games where he showed potential, but he's never developed into that Jason Kidd point guard that everyone thought he was going to be. And I know injuries may have derailed him, but am I wrong in saying that he probably wouldn't have had a huge impact on the series?
No, and the thing I think people misunderstand too is if he's in, somebody's losing minutes.
Yeah.
It's like you look at game 1 when they could barely have anything of offense. Yeah, he's in, but how many shots does he take away from Kobe White, who had 23 minutes off the bench, 12 points. He was really their biggest bench scorer. Game two, how many shots is he taking away from DeMar DeRozan?
Hmm.
Not saying that they're not going to force feed it to DeMar DeRozan, but just because somebody's healthy doesn't mean that it's automatically better. I mean, look what happened with Chris Middleton 4 versus Chris Middleton without.
Hmm.
There's so many things that go into it that you just can't say, oh, Lonzo, it would be 3-1 or 2-2. Possibly, but it's far away to say that.
Yeah. And then Trevor, I think we were on with Zach. What? Not last week, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, last week was Easter. But um, we talked about, are you not scared, but is there any team that kind of strikes your eye that could give the Bucks a good series? Now that we've kind of seen the first 3-4 games of the playoff shakeout, does your answer change, or is there anyone in the East that you're really petrified of, or anything that could stumble the Bucks and maybe give them an earlier exit than we anticipate?
Yeah, I think for the second straight year, the lower part of the Eastern bracket, the 2-3 matchup, Celtics Bucks, I think the winner of that goes to the finals.
Yeah, agreed.
Um, the Heat, you know, again, they're up 2-1 on the Hawks. The Hawks are not a bad team. Heat are lucky to not be down 1-2 right now.
Hmm.
And James Harden is a shell of himself.
Yep.
So, in terms of petrified, if we get to the finals, I'm not worried about anybody because probably the Suns or Memphis or Golden State, we've played both those teams well, and Memphis has struggled with Minnesota. But I just look at Boston. It's going to be a war of a series. If they can get through that and get Chris Middleton back, I don't think the Bucks fans should be scared of anybody.
Totally agree. Would it be nice to get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving out of the playoffs? Of course, but going back to your point that you've been saying for months now is Brooklyn's tired as hell. They've been clawing and scratching to even make the playoffs. They got to play in game. They're gonna tire out, and that obviously looks the way it does against Boston right now. Shout out to Paul Pierce. Love the guy, but he's saying that Jason Tatum's now passing Kevin Durant on the NBA best players in the league right now. I don't know where you pull that one out of, but I mean that's just probably just player bias. But yeah, it would be nice to get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving into the playoffs. But at this point, I almost feel like I want to play them. I don't know that I want them to get. I don't know. I'm with you. I'm not really petrified of anyone. It's kind of this. Who's our next opponent going to be? Let's take care of business and let's move on to the next one, right?
For sure.
Oh, one more other thing that I forgot to mention. Serge Ibaka got 2 minutes. We obviously we traded for him in the middle of the year to kind of be that big man when Brook Lopez is out. Um, I don't necessarily know that I'm totally upset that Serge Ibaka isn't playing because I know we kind of talked about this with Zach with our mock drafts, drafting Calcaterra from SMU, just kind of being a fill-in guy until Tanyan's ready. That's kind of how the Ibaka experiment has gone in my mind, right?
A little bit. I think another big factor too is like I look at the Bulls team and I don't know who
Yeah,
he guards.
right.
Like he's not going to be on Williams. Obviously, none of the guards. And I look at Vucevic and the way he plays. He likes to shoot the threes. Like just his style of play doesn't work well for Ibaka as a defender.
Hmm.
Sometimes styles don't mix. So I think come Boston, you'll see him a little bit more. Still not a ton, but I think it's a good call to have him in 3 minutes against the Bulls because I don't know defensively or offensively if his style really works against Chicago.
Agreed. And maybe, if we get a series against Philadelphia or something, he'll, come in and spell Brook Lopez a couple minutes here and there just to bang down low with Joel Embiid. But yeah, you're totally right. Maybe this probably isn't the greatest matchup of all time for him. And we saw that with Bobby Portis against Atlanta last year, maybe, where Bobby Portis didn't
Yeah.
play much. So, you know, to all the people who are still asking for Coach Budenholzer's job, at least he knows he can recognize what matchups may work and which may not work, right?
hmm
So on that note, Trevor, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
It's just going to be a long, exhausting Monday, Tuesday. Like, I
Hmm.
don't know what it is with these two gaps of 3 days or 2 days between games. It feels a little weird, but I feel like both fan bases at this point are like, let's just get this shit over with.
Hmm.
Like, just play the game Tuesday.
considering that Chicago and Milwaukee are only 90 minutes away from each other.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, on that, I'll say on behalf of Trevor, that's all for us. Thank you for watching. If you're watching live and you want to let people know, tell them to check out our YouTube channel, Flurry Sports. Please subscribe; it helps us a lot. We're still making pushes for 1,000, 2,000 subscribers, however you want to put that down. We got a lot of NFL draft stuff coming out right now on flurrysports.org. A lot of player profiles. I'm sure we'll get mock drafts coming pretty quickly here. We have video mock drafts, us two and Zach. Us two, Zach and Janet will be on Thursday, I believe is the plan, to go over instant reactions for the Packers draft picks. And I mean, check out all our stuff. Zach and Jake still going strong with Flurry Pod. I think Henry and Zach are still got a bunch of racing stuff going. I'm sure we'll get some more baseball stuff coming out once NBA playoffs are kind of getting to the end and NFL draft stuff is done. But I mean, stay tuned. We got a lot of stuff coming out. Check out check out the website. It's a good resource to use if you want to know up to date sports stuff, especially NFL stuff. Because I'll speak for Zach on this. I think we're killing it there. Um, but on that note, follow us on Twitter at Luke Rhyme at Trevor Lane 2, and we're out of here. Go Bucks.
See ya.